Welcome back to A Different Opinion. Yet again, I hope you guys have been enjoying the content. Like I said, leave a like if you do like the videos. Please leave your comments with your thoughts, your opinions as well. And then also, if you do want to see future videos, please subscribe and see how we go, seeing as I'm quite new. I've only been doing it for just over a month now. So I'll jump straight to this one. I mean, it is a big thing happening at the moment that I've been seeing a lot is the Sri Lanka crisis. And if you don't know about it, it is pretty much just that their economy is tanking big time. They own so much debt. Food stores are closing over there. They don't have enough food because in the middle of their crisis with COVID and also just the amount of sheer debt they have as a country, they actually decided, the government decided we're going to go organic with our farming. So it literally made no sense. They thought they were doing the right thing by trying to be, net zero, organic, blah, 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 blah. But it actually made their crop for all of the exports and also all their food. I believe it's like under half, which we'll jump into in these articles anyway. But just to give you a little bit of a summary of what we'll be talking about. Root cause for the present economic crisis in Sri Lanka. Research article. So it's from Dilshara Hasanka on LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn, we can all say what we want to say about it. It isn't the best site for things like this, but it is a pretty good article. As we witness, Sri Lanka is going through the worst economic crisis since its independence, which has caused a series of severe impacts on the citizens of Sri Lanka. Since 2010, the foreign debts gradually increased and accumulated, which worsened in the last 3 years. Foreign exchange reserves in Sri Lanka have depleted to the extent that Sri Lankan economy faces hyperinflation. This has led to serious issues within the country, including fuel shortage, food shortage, export restrictions, skyrocketing exchange rates, and extended power outages that eventually create social unrest. So this is from May 20th, about 3 days ago. The sharp rise in foreign debts reached 88% of the country's GDP in 2019, which is ridiculous. And in the last 2 years, it showed an exponential increase in foreign debts, increasing the percentage up to 120% by the end of March 2022. Sri Lanka's inflation accelerated to 15.1% in February, from 14.2% in December. So 0.9% up just in 2 months. It's crazy. The highest recorded inflation since 2008. So it just kind of shows you the foreign debt composition in Sri Lanka. Commercial borrowings are nearly 60% of everything concession borrowing. Just see it gradually increasing here over the years. Obviously, big jump here since 2008 with even a bigger inflation rate before that. We could outline several major incidents that caused a shortage of foreign reserves. Easter Sunday attack in 2019. April caused a heavy downfall in the tourism industry. Even before it recovered, the COVID-19 pandemic caused catastrophic damage to Sri Lankan economy. So do other economies all around the world. The newly appointed government made large tax cuts that affected the government revenue streams, and in compensation, the central bank began printing money to cover their loss. Who does that sound like? Joe Biden, it sounds like. Despite the fact that the IMF advised the Sri Lankan government to raise the taxes and interest rates to tackle the situation, government printed 1.2 trillion rupees in 2021. Here's the organic thing I was talking about. So Sri Lanka has always had a trade deficit in a net export and was still unable to find a balance of trade. In such a situation, President Gotabaya announced a 100% organic farming program that got backfired on the total export economy in Sri Lanka. Instead of going for a phase-by-phase implementation like anyone probably would, the government imposed an island-wide ban on inorganic fertilizer and pesticides and encouraged the farmers to use organic fertilizers. It's just crazy how there's not a step-by-step, let's say a 3-year plan or at least a 2-year plan or something like that, so the actual farmers don't get shot up in the butt. The tea export industry got the biggest hit from the export crops, resulting in economic loss of 425 million US dollars, and the food prices skyrocketed with the food shortage in the market. Sri Lanka had to import rice worth 450% million US dollars due to the 20% drop in rice production. In 2021 September, the government announced an economic emergency due to high exchange rates, high inflation rates, rise in food prices, and travel restrictions, which impacted the country's economy as a whole. In 2019, Sri Lanka had foreign debt worth 42% of the country's GDP, showed a marked increase in the next 2 years by regarding foreign debt to 119%. It shows you market borrowings 47%, China 10%, Japan 10, ADB 13, World Bank, etc. India only 2%, which is surprising. Although China has continuously offered loans for major infrastructure developments in Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka has still not buried itself in China's debt trap. I know that, yeah, China, with many countries, they just, yeah, borrow this, borrow this, borrow this, borrow this, and they just know that these countries can't pay it back. They just literally can't pay it back. And China will just blindly go and lend them money because they know in the end, when they come collecting, things will happen. Sri Lanka owes most of its debt to international capital market, which is 47%, 22% multilateral development banks. At this cost, Sri Lanka will have two options for their hand to tackle the debt crisis. They can reach out to the International Monetary Fund to take a loan under their financial assistance, but these actions have their own consequences. The IMF would try to intervene in the country's internal affairs by the name of assistance, and Sri Lanka will have to make financial decisions that IMF professionals directly guide. So pretty much whatever they say has got to go. In January 2022, although Sri Lanka was running out of foreign reserves, the governor, the central bank, Ajit Nivad Abral, was optimistic that Sri Lanka doesn't need the support of the IMF. But in the next 2 months, Sri Lankan foreign reserves dropped to 2.36 billion, which Sri Lanka has 7 billion of foreign debts due to pay, which is just, you can't pay that with that. Sri Lanka has the second option on its hands to restructure its debts. Sri Lanka could borrow more loans for low interest rates, settle the existing loans in 2022 April. Sri Lanka has taken 1 billion loan from China to settle the existing loans payable to China. Sri Lankan rupee has currently faced historic low of 376 rupees against the dollar, and still it's not sufficient to tackle the dollar crisis country is going through. As economic crisis worsens, citizens have faced numerous difficulties in their day-to-day lives. Electricity and fuel shortages have become major issues for all aspects of the country. Sri Lanka has been experiencing power outages for up to 15 hours and miles-long vehicle queues near fuel stations. They're just running out, like insane. They can't get any new stuff in because they can't afford it. And because of that stupid organic, want to go 100% organic just overnight, it just stuffed everything. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, when you see countries going like this is kind of what ends up happening. So the Observer view, this is from The Guardian, the Observer view on the growing crisis in Sri Lanka, just from yesterday. There is not a country, quickly pause the old video. There is not a country that escaped the combined economic shocks of COVID-19, global spike in oil and food prices triggered Russia's continuing invasion of Ukraine. Painful for wealthy countries, for low to middle income countries, it risks being existential. Sri Lanka mirrored in crisis. Last week defaulted on its debt for the first time in its history. While its collapsing economy is such a product of the corrupt politics as of global economic trends, Sri Lanka is also worrying bellwether for the instability elsewhere that may be triggered by a declining economy, security in countries, and high levels of poverty. Yeah, like, I mean, I've seen pictures in the past and just, yeah, it's not a very nice country to live in if you don't have money. Definitely not. The situation facing Sri Lanka's citizens is dire. Soaring inflation has taken the price of basic goods out of reach for many, and extreme shortages of food, medicine, and fuel mean people have to spend hours queuing in extreme heat while shops have been forced to close. Wow. For months, there have been peaceful anti-government protests driven by anger with the political elite, but in recent weeks, they have turned violent. One politician has been killed by a mob, and others had their house set alight. It shows how easy we kind of have it in the West. Politicians make the wildest decisions, the dumbest decisions, which affect so many people, but, you know, not many times that people actually, apart from America now, where they actually go outside judges' houses and protest, but they never actually kill a politician. Very, very, not many times, should I say. Crisis has been long in the making, the product of 20 years, unsustainable levels of borrowing and fund unwise projects, the level of taxation that has been too low has made Sri Lanka particularly vulnerable to impact of COVID, including the tourism industry. Additionally, the current administration cut taxes further just before the pandemic. Can't do that when you're in so much debt. It's can't keep cutting taxes, unfortunately. Even though they want to help their people, you can't. In the end, it's going to be worse. And banned the import of chemical fertilizers in April 2021, which has had a ruinous impact on Sri Lanka's domestic food production, making it even more reliant on expensive imports. So it's just kind of always importing and borrowing. I mean, you see here, this is from just today. Sri Lanka receives aid thanks to Stalin and people of India. New Delhi labelled a message of care. A fresh batch of relief supplies was handed over to crisis hit Sri Lanka by the Indian High Commissioner on Sunday, expressing gratitude. Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Sri Lanka today received SLR 2 billion worth of humanitarian aid, including milk powder, rice, and medicine from India. Sincere gratitude to the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin and the people of India for the support extended. Whenever I read that name, Stalin, it just makes me, think of Stalin, if you know who I'm talking about. Stalin had flagged off the ship laden with supplies from Chennai Wednesday, a message of care from the people of India to the people of Sri Lanka. We handed over rice, milk powders, and medicines worth Sri Lankan rupee 2 billion to Sri Lankan Minister G.L. Perez. I don't actually know would that be a lot, because I mean obviously their money is very weak at the moment, isn't it? This is just from today as well. We're going to die. Sri Lanka warns of food shortages. Colombo, which is the major city in Sri Lanka's Prime Minister has warned of a food shortage as the island nation battles devastating economic crisis. Just crazy. Decision April last year by President Rajapaksa to ban all chemical fertilizers drastically cut yields. Just baffles me how he can decide that, and now they're living with the consequences because of this idiot making these stupid decisions during COVID, mind you. While there may not be time to obtain fertilizer for this Yalla May to August season, steps are being taken to ensure adequate stocks for the Maha season, which is September to March season. Prime Minister Wickremesinghe said in a message on Twitter late on Thursday, I sincerely urge everyone to accept the gravity of the situation. Sri Lanka is facing a dire shortage of foreign exchange, fuel, and medicines, and economic activity has slowed to a crawl. It's never good to see. And then you see here Sri Lanka, massive protests and state of emergency continue in Sri Lanka. Public anger over the country's worst economic crisis in decades drives the unrest. There's a shortage of cooking gas, and then we have 12-hour power cuts. There's no petrol or diesel. There's a Christian worker and serving in the country. I mean, power cut ones, sorry, when I was even living in South Africa, and it's not that we were living in a bad neighbor or anything, but our power there is horrible. You'll get random power cuts like this all the time too, and this is, before the country is where it is now. The entire cabinet resigned this week to try and appease protesters. Well, it's probably because they don't want to die. Police reportedly arrested hundreds of defying nationwide curfew. India prepared a massive shipment of food aid, which we've seen in the last article, while China issued warnings to its citizens in Sri Lanka. Many in Sri Lanka feel the economic crisis directly results from incompetency, impulsiveness. It is. Our president has been making some seriously foolish decisions that have erupted in this situation. One example is suddenly decided to go 100% organic and ban fertilizer. As a result, there is no agriculture failure. We presume there will be a shortage of food within the next few months. On April 21, 2019, suicide bombers targeted Easter services at 3 churches in Sri Lankan capital. The attacks killed 269 people and injured at least 500. Wow. A presidential commissioner inquired into that and made some recommendations. The report has not been fully published to the people or even the parliament. Albert Malcolm Ranjith, Archbishop of Colombo, Sri Lanka. That's not Christian though. That's obviously Catholic. Of Colombo, Sri Lanka has been offensive, asking government to release Soap's culprits and be brought to justice for killing of hundreds in one day, about 500 people disabled for life. Well, yeah, look, Sri Lanka is just going, very much downhill from here. Hopefully it can be helped out. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start, really. They don't really have anyone to rely on apart from India at the moment. Whereas in Greece and all those countries that, do pretty much had to go into default as well, at least they got backed up by Europe, didn't they? By the European Commission. But Sri Lanka's pretty much on its own. I mean, hopefully it can get some help. It's definitely a country that I've wanted to go to in my life, but I've always known that the situation is just getting worse, because even years ago when I was younger, I even read that they just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And then I kept hearing about trying to keep offering. So I'm hoping they can sort it out. It'll be interesting to see. I'll keep an eye on this for sure. Hopefully it doesn't get too wild. Hopefully you enjoyed the video as well. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you know of any other things like this happening around the world as well. It'll be interesting to hear about it and your side of the story as well. If you do enjoy the video, please leave a like. Please subscribe if you do want to see my future videos as well. Until then, I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.